Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of The Outpost, as well as the series premiere of Evil. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about the season finale of The Outpost, you can skip to what I had to say about the series premiere of Evil. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the season finale of The Outpost. A great season finale. Well, obviously I'm going to be talking about both episodes. A lot of stuff's going to get blended together, but there's so much good stuff that dropped in these episodes. So let's break it down. Obviously, we have Garrett and Talon in the Capitol, and Garrett goes full-blown revenge. And I like he was able to exact his revenge against the dude. I like he almost like systematically took the dude down to like cutting at his leg, because he's like, oh yeah, the fact of the matter is I know how slow you are, because the reason why you're able to beat me up before, I was wounded, and so it wasn't like Garrett was at his best, but it's like, yo, I'm back, I'm at my best, watch me take you down. And Garrett gets his revenge, and the dude's like, where'd you learn how to fight like that? He's like, from my father. Don't worry, I'll send your best to Sana. And stabs him, and he's like, right before I kill her. It's like, woo! Because Garrett needed to do this, because for him, it's like he didn't want Talon to be a part of this. It's like she's outside systematically kicking some Prime Order soldier ass. And so for him, it's like I said, he needed this for himself. So after this, they leave the Capitol, because it's like, okay, we got to go warn everyone in the Outpost about the everyone, because it's like, they're already on their way. Sana, along with one of the three, as well as some of the Prime Order soldiers, they have an army with them. So there's that going down. We have Naya returning to the Outpost, knowing exactly what this would mean. And so because of what she witnessed, but Gwyn doesn't want to believe her, because it's like, the fact of the matter is, all you've done is lie to me. How can I really truly believe anything you say, especially something outlandish like this? So she gets locked up. But then there's the cute moment between her and Naya and Janzo when they're reunited and they're kissing. It's like, oh, and you just have Eleanor being like, get a room. It's like, oh, why you got to be such a humbug? Like, you got to ruin everyone's happy time and stuff like that. But they're like reunited, and she explains about the explosive device, and Janzo being the only one to believe her. It's like, well, partly because he does love her, but at the same time, it's also because it's like, well, because what she explained is something, as someone who is who tinkers with stuff, like he knows there's truth to it. So he brings it up to Gwyn, which Gwyn is like, I mean, come on, it sounds like something from a fairy tale. He's like, really? You mean like plaguelings and demons, Lakiri, and then like portals to another world? And she's like, okay, you made a point. It's like, after everything we've come to experience, can you really just say like, oh, this here is where we draw the line of nonsense? But Gwyn didn't want to listen. And I like that Janzo brought it up again, the whole thing of like, does it, like, how do you feel about, does it hurt you having locked up your friends and stuff like that, the people you can kind of trust the most? Which even she's like, yes, I know. Like, the fact of the matter is, it does bother me, but I have to be a just queen. I can't, like, you broke the rules, and these are what the laws are. So the fact of the matter is, I got to show that even though we're friends, I won't let that be enough to slide. Like, I'm gonna treat everyone fairly. And that's the thing of like, yeah, at least you're treating everyone the same. But at the same time, what Janzo brought up, and it's kind of like what the criminal system's supposed to be. Like I brought that up before, like the parallels with real life of like giving people a second chance. A chance to make up for what they've done. It's like, okay, you've made a mistake, but why won't you give someone a chance to kind of make up for? Because like she'd even brought it up before, like all the good that Janzo's done is kind of outweighed by like this one bad thing. And so it's like Gwyn's not really listening to him. So he's like, the fact of the matter is, I might as well go back to my cell. I even love him being like, okay, take me back to the cell. He's like, open the gates, the door, you peasants, and goes back to his cell and everything. But the whole situation does get Gwyn. Well, first of all, there's the Alton situation. I love that. It's like, all right, so like the fact is you have Gwyn and Tobin messing with him, talking about the poison wine and whatnot. Because at first they were doing that, I was like, wait, is this supposed to be like some kind of test or something like that? But it was like, no, it was just them messing with him. I was like, that's a sadistic joke. But then, later on, Calcazar's brother Walden shows up because initially Alton was supposed to go off on a mission of like try to get some allies. It's like, oh, this lord that I serve, he has his alchemist, he know all about this, and it's like, okay, so he's about to go, and then Walden shows up, and it's like, oh, actually, he's like, I don't know who you are. You're definitely not Alton because Alton died. I was there when he got executed. So it's like, the dude is a liar. I was like, dude. But then part of my brain was like, but what if this Calcazar isn't like the Calcazar we know? Like, what if Walden is kind of a bad guy? What if he is lying? I was like, on a small level, I was thinking that, but I was like, nah. But I did like that because even Tobin was like, oh, I thought you were going to let your heart get the best of you, which Gwyn is like, yeah, I wanted him to be my brother, but I knew I couldn't take the chance. I wasn't going to be stupid about it. I knew there was a chance that he might be a fraud, so I wasn't going to accept him as my brother fully until I've kind of done go through every possible means of proving whether he is or not. So she was actually just stalling time, like making him think like, oh, it's stuck. You are my brother. She's been so embracing him and stuff like that because he was like, yeah, I didn't know I had a sister out there, but there was some part of me wondering if you were an imposter, but here I am. I was so worried you were a fraud, but now it's like, oh, there was some part of me that was still so hopeful that you were actually my sister. And it's like, I had this heartwarming moment, and obviously that kind of gets all undone when it's like, and he turns out to be a fraud. But I did like the whole thing too, because it's something I'd brought up before of like, okay, if he was a fraud, how would he know what he knows? It's like either he was sent by the three, which I felt like that wasn't the case, or at the very least, he was someone, or well, more so a combination, but I figured like it was like a combination of maybe potentially like that. Plus, he was someone that worked in the castle. Like he might have been the child of a servant, like I figured someone set him up to do this. So we find out the reason why he knows as much as he does, because the Sammy that she referenced when she was talking to him, like the friend that they had that they spent so much time with, Gwyn brings up the fact that he was almost like a brother with like them because that was like her brother's childhood friend. So it's like he would know so much because any shenanigans they got into, he mostly got in the mix as well. So that's how Alton knows all this stuff, because he's really Sammy. The reason why Gwyn didn't recognize him because it's been years, but also he was chubby back then and he slimmed down a lot. So, but it turns out all of this was about, he didn't really care about getting the throne or nothing like that. But for him, it's a little recompense, as he puts it, because for him, it's like, you act like, oh, everything was all good back then for him, because it's the whole situation of like, I was kind of more pushed to be your brother's friend. The fact of the matter is, like, if he got something good to eat, I got little scraps. Anytime he got in trouble, he got like yelled at or stuff like that, I'm the one that got the whip. It was never fair because it's the disparity between like him being royal family and you being kind of a peasant or whatever in that eyes. And so for him, it's like all he wanted, like the 50,000 gold he was going to take with on this mission of his, that's what he was going to take, just to kind of give a middle finger to the royal family because of just the way he was treated. So that's what this was all about. This is his form of revenge, which Gwyn is like, that's stupid. If you had literally told me you were Sammy, I would have welcomed you with open arms. This could have been your home. You could have stayed here with dignity and honor. Now you're going to die for being a thief and trying to claim the throne and all that. So, but obviously you have Walden being like, she's making the right choice. It's like, hey, your father would have made the same choices too. And it's like, hell, he had to execute a lot of his friends. And Gwyn's like, he did? It's like, yeah, hell, he even executed his first cousin. I'm like, that's interesting. And because it's like to prove that no one was above his law, above his rule. And Gwyn's like, that sounds familiar. So that's where it kind of comes from, probably because it was kind of instilled in her that this is how the royal family works. So because like I said, in her mind, she thinks she's being just, which in a way she is, but it's a very old-fashioned approach to things of like, not, because she's shown the same justness in season 1 when there was those traitors where she killed that one dude. Because she wanted to show that, like I said, she was a just ruler in all of this. So there's that situation. But this whole thing kind of got her thinking about maybe that's not the right move to make. Because the fact of the matter is, it's that thing of like, she thinks back to what Naya had told her in season 1, that like her dad, kind of in a way, kind of a tyrannical ruler, because he was kind of like someone that everyone feared, and she thought like, oh, it couldn't get much worse than this, and then the Prime Order came. So it's kind of a thing of like the Prime Order, the Prime Order was the greater of the two evils, and that kind of, hearing that, and thinking back on it now made Gwyn go, okay, so maybe, because it's like, no, like, basically it's almost like Walden was kind of like, your father was in a position where it's like, to get people to kind of follow the rules, it's kind of like he had to kind of make swift action. So it's almost a thing of like, as a ruler, are you better feared? Is it better to be feared or to be loved? That age-old thing. But I think for Gwyn, it's like, how does that really, that makes people fearful of us. I mean, no wonder the people turned on us, which one was like, no, that was the Prime Order size. It's like, yes, the Prime Order probably played into what was already there in a lot of people's hearts of just like, oh, look how crazy and terrible this king is. But with the Prime Order in charge, we'll bring a new order, like life will be different. So that's why like Gwyn's like, the way her father had handled things probably put those seeds of doubt in a lot of people's hearts. So, and because even Alton brings it up later on, the reason why he didn't just tell Gwyn the truth is because it's like, I didn't think it was possible, because he didn't realize she was a decent person, because he knew how the royals were. Like, he saw how he was treated back then, how they treated servants and stuff like that. That's why he put on that air of arrogance and like, this is what happens when you get so close to the help. It's because he was actually surprised to see Gwyn treat them like that, with respect, essentially. She didn't get all high and mighty. And so he was basing his opinion on the royals on her family. So that's it. But Gwyn isn't the same as her parents, because it's even something that she had said that Calcazard had told her, like, there are moments where you have to think with your heart instead of your head, which even his brother was like, that doesn't sound like my brother. But that's the thing. He probably changed a lot over those years, realizing like he probably didn't 100% agree with everything his king said, but it's kind of like, that's my king, I have to follow his orders. So he wanted Gwyn to be a different leader. Don't be the same leader your father was, who only thought with his head, thinking logistically. It's like sometimes you do have to just listen to your heart. And in this case, she did. She lets everyone go, because it's like she lets Eleanor go. She lets Genzo go, because like, for one, it's like, yeah, Eleanor, you did help me and everything. She's like, so I get my gold back, right? It's like, no, you turn people into plaguelings. It's like, yeah, I did, but Genzo cured him. It's like, no matter. And she's like, all right, fine, I'll go back to being a peasant then, and letting Genzo go because of the whole thing of like, hey, all the good that he's done has outweighed. It's like, yeah, because the fact is, even saying like in Naya's case, she knows exactly, like, as someone who misses their family, like, of course she would have done the exact same thing in her circumstances, most likely. So it's like, the fact of the matter is, I don't know if I can necessarily trust you the same way, but the fact of the matter is, it would be nice to kind of see you kicking around the outpost if you decide to stay. I thought that, I love that, because even Genzo being like, oh, she's Gwyn again, and you still had Naya being like, Genzo, that's Queen Rosamund, treat her with some respect. So even there, because even she said it, it's like, even if I betrayed you, I still love you because I respect you as a queen, but you're also a friend, so there's that whole thing. So I love that aspect to it. But we also got to talk about the big bombshell that Eleanor drops, where it's like, wait, that was your mom? She mentions her mom name. I was like, oh, is her mom somebody important? I wouldn't think so. And then Eleanor starts laughing, and she's like, oh, because I know her because I sold you to her. I'm like, wait. I was like, no, they're not. He's like, Genzo's like, what are you telling me, Mom? It's like, the person over there making out with is your sister. And they both quickly get away from each other. I was like, no, I can't believe it. I don't remember if I brought that up during the season 1 reviews, like any episode, but I always had an inkling, like, is that what they're setting up, the whole Genzo and Naya potentially being siblings? But it's like, no, I figured I just kind of let it go, but then I was like, they're probably not doing it. I just had this inkling, but then it's just like, never mind. But then they got close. It just didn't even cross my mind to think that, and they brought that brought that back like that. That's so interesting. And Eleanor is such a dick. She is laughing her ass off about this. And just like, I hope you two didn't do anything else. And he's just like, mother, stop. And it's just so like, oh my God, you made out so much. Not only with your sister, your twin sister. It makes it even worse, dude. But still, it's that interesting, it's that weird thing of they're kind of a little awkward around each other. But Jansen's like, I'm glad you're my sister. She's like, I'm not. I would have preferred being your lover. It's actually sad because it's like, oh, they had fallen in love with each other. I mean, but now their love is just going to take on a different form. It's still just weird and awkward, but it is sweet that they finally, because Janzo never knew. He always thought about her, like, what kind of person was she? Is she still alive? And she's like, oh, I never thought of that. I mean, she's like, not because I didn't want to. I mean, I didn't even know about you. I mean, if I did know about you. And he's laughing. She's like, what are you laughing at? He's like, the way you're stumbling over your words like that, it's obvious you're my sister. And it's this cute moment like that. Because even I was like, yeah, that's a Janzo thing she's doing, the whole like stumbling. And like, can't get her words right. I thought that's kind of adorable. So it's like, things are a little weird and awkward, but they found each other. And I think that's so amazing. I even love it later on when Mutt, it's like, you found her again. It's like, Mutt, that's my sister. He's like, wait. That's your sister, but you're my brother, so that means that she's my sister. He picks her up and hugs her, and he's like, always wanted a sister. I'm like, this family stuff is so good. I love it. That's so amazing. It's so adorable. It's so, oh my God, there's so much. I love that so much. Okay, then, so we're also going to circle back around to Garrett and Talon going to sneak after the three. They dropped another big bombshell on me I didn't even think about. I feel so stupid for not thinking about it, but Garrett brings up the fact is that the three have powers, and then Talon goes, they must have kinges. I was like, what? Why didn't it didn't even cross my mind to think about that. I was like, oh my God, because Zed had said it himself. I'm forgetting the number. I think it's like the one that Talon has, plus there were 6 others, or is it like there's 6, but there are 5 others? So either way, that means the 3 have 1 each. And then Zed has 1. So there's at least, if there was 7, there's 2 out there, but I think at least there might be 1 more out there that we might not be aware of. That's probably what happened. They probably killed, that's why there was only 1 left, because they had probably killed all the other ones to make sure that, no one else got the power, or at the very least at some point they got the power themselves. I'm wondering, when did they figure that out? I don't know. I just thought that was such an interesting thing. Obviously, they go there to kill him. Obviously, he uses his power. It kind of cripples Garrett from pain, but it doesn't work on Talon, so she kills him. And Garrett's like, should we cut that Kinj out of his head? It's like, no, it's fine. It'll die with him. I'm like, you better hope so. I was like, oh, the fact of the matter is, it's someone else is going to find it, isn't it? So I wasn't completely off. Kasana comes over and she brings him back long enough for him to transfer the Kinj to her. So now she has it, and it's like, okay. So Garrett wants his revenge, but he can't get it because it's like, oh, this Kasana has it, and she has an entire army now. So there's that. So everyone's preparing, everyone's reunited. They're like, all right, so we got to figure out what we're going to do. They have access to this explosive device, and it can destroy the entire outpost. So what do? We leave. Well, what about the demons? Talon throws that out there. But obviously, Gwyn is like, the fact is, I've met 3 blackbloods. I've met you. You're my best friend. I trust you wholeheartedly. But then there's Reb. Couldn't trust her. She legitimately threatened to kill me. Then there's Zed, who betrayed you, so that's a whole thing in itself. So like, hey, we can't really go down that route, because how can we say that any of the other blackbloods that come through won't be the same way? And how can you say the same thing about the demons? Like, can you make sure that you are able to control all of them? So there's that whole situation, which I even love that being a conversation between Gwyn and Talon when they meet up and when they hug and everything, and Eleanor is like, there's too much hugging going on in this joint. You know why? Because everyone thinks they're going to die. It's sad too, because Mutt had tried to hug her and she dodged underneath it, so he wouldn't hug her. So there's that. And so there's a whole thing of like, okay, so Talon and Gwyn talk about Zed, and she's like, yeah, I'd thought I was catching feelings for him. And then Janzo's like, you were? And they're looking at him, and he's like, right, girl talk. I'll just be over here wallowing in my own self-pity. And she's like, I haven't slept with the bastard. And then Janzo drops everything. He's like, I'm sorry. Because I don't know if he's necessarily filled Talon or Gwyn in on the fact is that Naya is actually his sister. It's actually kind of sweet because he kind of sends her off, because I think it's a combination of like your skills, you could use them to help all these people who are going to Tobin's place to kind of, stay there while this battle is going on. But I think it's also because he didn't want his sister kind of caught up in all of this fighting and stuff like that. And it's like, he's like, when it's all said and done, I will find you again. And it's like, they just found each other and now they're kind of getting separated again. But it's so good, dude. I love it. It's family stuff. It's just like, it pulls at the heartstrings in many different ways. So at first when Gwyn was like, she had a plan, my thought was initially, I was like, I was like, you don't think they're going to try? I was idiotic and thinking like, oh, they're going to open up the portal to the land of Shadow and Ash and push the army through, and the Blackbloods on the other side will kill them on that side. I thought that's potentially what, but it's like, no, the portal doesn't suck people in. It's just open. So it's not like, unless you want to kick them in at one at a time, like it wouldn't work like that. So I was like, I was stupid. I wonder, is that something that could happen later on? Could the portal be bigger than what it is? Could like she literally like create a bigger tear, a bigger portal? I don't know. I mean, that potentially could be something that goes forward in the future. Regardless, but they locks a lot of the soldiers in. Genzo starts it off with one of his explosives, and everybody gets to battle. Gwyn battles Tobin, Talon, and Garrett are kicking ass on the battlefield and everything. Sammy is brought into this battle because Gwyn let him out, but it's like, you should get out of here. But he's like, no, like I can defend myself. I've actually spent so much time looking out for myself, so I know I can, defend. Let me make up for the fact that I betrayed you by fighting alongside you, because this way I can get your friendship back. So I thought that was pretty neat. Like I said, along with her giving him and everyone a second chance, and like I said, I think this shows you Gwyn is going to be a ruler like no one else. So I thought that was pretty neat. But along with all of that, the battle rage is on and stuff. So it's like, okay, so you have Eleanor and Munt trying to leave with the gold, but Genzo's in trouble, and they both go to his aid, especially Eleanor being like, get away from my boy. But the soldier stabs her, and she dies in Genzo and Munt's arms. And it's like, no! I'm like, that sucks. It's like, because like, no matter how twisted Eleanor is, like for one, she's a survivor. You never would have thought that. I'm curious to see what Gertie's going to do, because she, her and Eleanor never made up. They spent so much time in competition with each other, being so mad at each other, they never had a chance to make up, and Gertie will never get that chance again with her sister. So that's something to kind of think about too. And it's sad, it's like, because even in this moment, Genzo has a complicated relationship, but he still loves her. That is his mother. She has been his family for a long time. And that showed you at the end that she did care about her boys, no matter how complicated thing is. It does beg the question, like, what about Brogan? I mean, that's still their brother and everything. I mean, last time we saw him, Eleanor kind of was like, oh, that's your fault. Get out of here. Oh, like, I wonder, did she secretly meet up with him later and send him somewhere else? Or is he just kind of off on his own? I think we might see something kind of circle back around about that. Not unless Brogan ends up running into Gertie later on and he chills with her. It's like, oh, she is my new mom or something like that. I don't know, something crazy like that. But Munt went on a rampage. He picked up a mallet and started kicking ass. Everyone's fighting their way through. Like I said, Sammy having Gwyn's back like that, proving that he is a good fighter, gets hurt in the process, but luckily they weren't able to win this battle. But sadly, they ended up losing half their people in just fighting this amount of people. Then, even more of an army's brought in, plus they still have the bomb. So it's like, what do we do with this? Someone's going to have to go through the tunnels. That's what Eleanor's final words were about. There's a tunnel system that leads directly to the battlefield that, hey, we could use, because Genzo's saying, use my explosive to open up a way there, and we set off the bomb there so they can't use it, wiping their forces out while also protecting us from the bomb. Talon and Garrett are like, I should do it. But Garrett is so focused on his revenge. He's like, I need to go be the one to do it. But Talon's like, I know that's the main reason why you're doing this. You could potentially go get yourself killed, but you're so determined about revenge. And he's like, because she's like, I'm telling you from personal experience, when I killed the final of the bones, it didn't fill that hole in my heart. And it's like, so what did? And she was like, you, Gwyn, Genzo, the Outpost. You gave me something better to fight for, a family, you know? But Garrett goes anyway. Him and Genzo blow open the hole, and it's like he's there confronted with her. And I was like, how are you going to face the fact that she can bring you? I was like, so are you going to die in this, Garrett? Is she going to use her powers, but the last second before she's able to kill you, you kill her? Turns out not the case, because she already, just in the case that something like this might happen, she already sent the Kinj back to the capital. But she's like, oh, you're not going to kill me, Garrett, because, I'm your love and you're mine. The fact that, it's like, I don't know if he's thrown out the fact is, I don't think she knew yet, but it's like, yeah, I did kill your hubby, but I don't think he brought that up to her intention. Because she's trying to get close to him. It's like, because you're mine forever. And as he's saying that, he stabs her. And it's like, you made me kill my own father. So it's like, I will never be yours. He sets off the bomb, goes into the tunnel. It explodes. And like, Genzo, are you okay? And it's like, he is. And it's like, yeah. And I love that Genzo hugs Garrett. Because it's like, they're bros. Like, they have a complicated thing because of the whole talent thing. But I think it's also like, nah, like, Genzo does care about Garrett just like Garrett cares about him. So in the end, they were able to win on that side. Talon, knowing, like, seeing the approaching army and everything, knew she only had one choice. So while everyone's kind of backing up to the keep to make one final stand because they couldn't abandon the outpost, because not only is it their home, it's also, well, they were able to get the citizens out, but it's like, this is not only Gwyn's home, it's also strategically the ore that they mine, the use for the weapons come from here. So it's kind of like, I need to, protect this place anyway. But Talon does what she needs to do, and she opens the portal. First one through is Zed. He can't use his powers because he's like, it only works on one person at a time, which I'm like, is that true? Does it truly work like that, or are you BSing? Or is it just because you don't have full control over it? Could you eventually learn to control multiple people, and it has to be within a certain distance? It's kind of like a Killgrave situation to a certain degree. But along that same line, it's like, all right, demons pour out as well as blackbloods, and it's like, yeah, they fight off the Prime Order. A lot of the Prime Order is afraid to kind of get too close because it's like, oh, these are demons, so. But the explosion not only killed some of the demons, killed a lot. It reached the outpost, even though, like, there was a good distance between the gate and whatnot. The explosion was massive enough to wipe out all the army. So luckily they were able to fully and completely win. And it's like, yay, victory is ours. Yeah. And they kind of have this moment to celebrate before everything kind of ultimately goes to shit, because Zed is like, oh, like, at the end of the day, Talon, you're going to have to choose a side, because it turns out the blackbloods he brought with him are Blackfist. And she's like, why'd you bring them? It's like, because for him, it's like, even though he said all that, all he said was just to kind of get her guard lowered. Because for him, it's like, no matter who knows how much time actually passed between her pushing him into the gate and not. Because now that he knew that there was actually a way out, he knew eventually it'd come a time she'd have to open the portal again. He could use that time, because for him, it's like, at the end of the day, we're Blackbloods. So no matter what heinous crimes they did, the fact of the matter is we got to stand together. So that's what matters. So even though, because she'd even made a point of, he was saying like, oh, we're only doing what we need to survive, which I guess makes sense to it, which kind of fits in the same regard as well, but still. So now he's trying to force her hand. He's actually saying that the outpost was actually built by Blackbloods a long, long, long time ago. And, it's because, like, oh, humans think they built it because, winners of the war get to rewrite history. So now they've taken over the outpost, and it's like, you guys are our prisoners. And it's like, dude, to be fair, because it's so much. It's like, for one, it's like, it's just like, they were worried about. And now Talon, it's like, now she's in that tough spot, because now, like, she's going to be somewhat a prisoner, because it's like, so what is she going to do? Is she going to turn against all her people? Like, is she going to have to go against all her people? Or is Zed just a select few? Like, is she going to be able to bridge the gap between her people? Who knows? For now, all this is happening while the Prime Order is still out there, which I'm curious what Zed's going to do about that. Because at that moment he was talking to Gwyn, I thought he was going to use his power to take control of her in that instant, but he didn't, which still doesn't mean he won't. So there's that. But like I said, there's also potentially one or two Kinjis left out there to see, like, who can get it. That also shows it's not just like a Blackblood thing. Maybe, like, it's more powerful in a Blackblood's hand, but obviously, like, the three are humans and they're able to make use of it. So The prophecy did say that they were the slayers of men. So is it just a prime order, or is it just humans in general that this? Or maybe it's supposed to be the fact is that eventually the two groups will so intermingle later on that it goes away with humans and blackbloods because they'll be so integrated generations down the line that everyone will end up having black blood. That could be one way of perceiving this, but that's much later down the road as a possibility. Who knows if we'll necessarily even get there? That depends on how this whole situation plays out. Quite a way to end off the season. At the time of me recording this, the Outpost has not been renewed for a third season. It hasn't been, said whether or not what this show's status is. I'm hoping it does come back for a third season. I'm so interested to see where they go. Because like I said, there's so much in this show that hasn't really been touched on too much. Like the Grayskins are just like a background thing that popped up here and there. But even then, it's like, now that there's so many forces at play. There's a Prime Order. There's Rosman and, now they're kind of prisoners to the Blackbloods who've kind of returned. But not a lot of them, only some of them. But they also have Lakiri on their side because Rosman's army isn't what it was because they already lost half their men. There's still people on the outside. There's all her citizens, the people that are back at, Tobin's stronghold with Gertie. So there's a lot at play here, and I'm so interested to see, like I said, because the Prime Order is still like the main threat. So it's like maybe the Blackbloods, Zed and the others won't look at them as a threat. We might even see some contention amongst them because maybe some of them are like, oh, we're going to have to, what are they going to do about Talon? Because they can't get the Kinj from her. If they kill her, they won't be able to get it because the Kinj will protect itself. It won't go to them. It has to be given willingly, So like what happened with the Warren and Sana. So I have no idea. I didn't even talk about it either, but there's a whole thing about Garrett giving his blessings to Gwyn and Tobin, because for him, it's like, yeah, I care about you, Gwyn, but the fact of the matter is I can never be that man that you once loved. Like, we can never care for each other in the way we did before. But Tobin, he's a really good dude. Like, they even acknowledged each other on the battlefield, being like, yeah, you got this. Let's kick some ass, So he recognizes that, and he's like, I will, as long as I'm alive and as long as you're still alive, I will forever serve you, Queen Rosman. Calling her Rosman instead of calling her Gwyn too, I think shows, a lot, So there is a lot I would love to see in season 3. This new family dynamic for Janzo, having his sister back into his life, also still dealing with the fact is that him and Munt lost their mom and like how they're going to, deal with that. I'd love to see what they do with a season 3. Like I said, I'm very hopeful for this show to get a third season because it needs it. And now moving on to the series premiere of Evil, a great series premiere. This is a really interesting show, and on many different levels. Just the premise behind it is so interesting, but also the fact this is on CBS is kind of interesting because it doesn't feel like it'd be something you would see on CBS. It's kind of like, and it's something I never even thought about till people had pointed out. It's kind of like Hannibal. Would you have ever expected a show like Hannibal on NBC? So it's kind of got that same vibe of like, this doesn't seem like it'd be like a major network show. I mean, not major network, but it just doesn't seem like you'd go. I mean, it's bloody, it's a little violent. I mean, granted, they don't go as like crazy as it would if it was like on an HBO or a Showtime or a Cinemax, sure, but it still goes further than I would have expected. It's a darker show, and I think that's so interesting, that darker tone. I feel like I'm surprised that that's on CBS, but regardless. Basically, we follow she's basically someone. She's a medical expert in the sense that she's brought in to see whether or not people are crazy or not. Obviously, this deals with this dude named Orson. He's in prison, and the whole debate is like whether or not, like, because he says he blacked out during all these murders because he's killed like 6 families. But the big question then becomes like, okay, is that real? Or, because, she's testified in many different cases, and the whole defense thing is like, well, the fact of the matter is you've worked with the prosecutors, you worked with the DA's office like 34 different times. They kind of pay your check and stuff like that. But for her, it's like, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I get paid for it, but it's like, the fact of the matter is all I do is search for the truth. And I had him answer some questions, and Orson seems like he's a deceitful person. You can't believe anything he says. That holds so much weight when you kind of get to the show later on. But then stuff starts popping up about demonic possession, which Kristen's like, what? Okay, so she goes to talk to Orson herself, and then she draws a cross in the table. He snaps and attacks her. So it kind of makes her a little frazzled, but she goes back to her boss, being the dude that hired her, to be like, yo, so okay, so I don't think he's possessed, but she's like, I need to reevaluate my assessment of him, because he might be, wants to see whether or not it is a thing of like, maybe he didn't necessarily black out, maybe he is crazy though. That's because it's like the truth matters to her. So it's a thing of like, he might be, suffering from delusions or something, but the dude is like, no, go with your original assessment, because they want to prosecute him. They don't want to take a chance that it's like, oh, this case might be thrown out, not necessarily thrown out, but maybe he'll just get off by being locked up in a hospital for the rest of his life, because it's like, oh, he's just clinically insane or something like that. So, but she's not willing to bend the truth or lie on the stand just for him. But he's talking about the fact is, if not, like, this relationship of ours will end, because basically I wasn't 100% sure how to really interpret that. Like, whether it was like there was really a relationship there between them, or is it because there's a relationship and the fact is she needs the money? Because we end up finding out she's raising 4 kids by herself because her husband's off. Because we find out later on that Kristen was a climber, but she stopped doing all that because she's a parent. But her husband, it seems like he didn't stop, and he sends money, which Kristen's mom is like, it's kind of messed up that he's not here. You're working a full-time job and raising these kids by yourself, and he has the nerve to send you money that he thinks will cover things. So, which also interesting, a little side note, Kristen Lottie obviously like has popped up in many different things. She was in Law and Order SVU a while back. CBS Connection, she plays, it's been a while, but one of them, was it Alex O'Loughlin's character in Hawaii Five-0, the TV show? She plays his mom. I don't know how often she's popped active in the show. It's been a while, so I haven't watched the show in a while, so I don't know if she's popped up again recently, but I know she plays his mom. But prior to that, she also she was in The Blacklist, so I think that's the most recent thing I'm aware of her being in, maybe, I think. Regardless, so that's kind of interesting, kind of getting that dynamic. It is kind of I think it's kind of neat that it kind of like this sweet element to the episode, while also dealing with the fact this is a dark show. Just like the little thing between her and her daughters is kind of sweet, and just like the family life and just her kind of struggling and everything. But nevertheless, she meets up with David, played by Mike Coulter. Obviously, you'll know, most recently best known for playing Luke Cage, on Netflix's Marvel, which is interesting because I'm not gonna say her last name because I can't remember it. But the actress who played Misty, her name is Simone. She's on a CBS show as well. She's on it's called All Rise. She's the main protagonist of the show. She's the judge. I was like, that's so cool that you're both on the same network. It's just interesting how stuff works out like that. But regardless, David works with the church. Basically, there's like backlog of like 5,000 different cases of like, maybe this is demonic possession. Maybe this is miracle stuff happening. Basically, him and his co-worker, Ben, they investigate to see whether or not whether there's legitimacy to this or not. And that's why he wants Kristen. Kristen isn't a believer. She used to be, into the Catholic faith, but then she kind of walked away from it. We don't know why. Maybe there's a specific reason why, but we'll kind of dive into later on. But David's like, no, that your skepticism is why I want you, because you won't look at it as like, you're not a full believer. So you'll kind of, and then at the end of the day, and like I said, the truth is what matters to her. And to him, that's all he wants. He wants to know whether this is just because insanity can look like demonic possession, but demonic possession can look like insanity. So he needs someone there to give him an impartial, observation to kind of guide his hand to see like whether or not this is really the case or not. So obviously the reason why this kind of all came up is because Orson's wife is like, she needed an explanation. So she's like, obviously my husband's possessed. Like there's no way he'd just randomly do all these heinous things. She had actually recorded something where all these like noise and stuff is in the background. And it's like, it's like almost like a whisper, but it's like this it's sound. And it's like, okay, so definitely something's up there. But what's interesting is it isn't just Kristen that's the only skeptic. Ben is as well. But I think it's really interesting because they made it so that it seems like Ben is the only full-blown skeptic, whereas it seems like Kristen seems like she borderlines like believing like David, but also being a skeptic like Ben. And I thought that was such a neat little element to the episode to kind of divide things up. But obviously, we have that moment with George, which I thought was kind of interesting. I also like how it's a little wacky too, because it's like, hi, my name is George. Oh, you think I'm having a night terror? If I was a night terror, could I really do this? He goes over into the corner and he pees. And then he's talking about the fact of the matter is like, oh, have a thing for your balls, your panties. Like, oh, is this like your C-section scar and stuff like that? And she screams, and it freaks her daughters out, and they came, to be there with her. And even though they're there to comfort her and sleeping in the same bed with her, you see her eyes open at the end because like she's still all freaked out. Interestingly enough, she go visit her therapist, which I think she said his name is Kurt, which it's funny because he's played by Kurt Fuller, which I'm like, I'm a big Psych fan, so it's just like, it's Woody. Dude, easily one of my favorite characters from Psych. Regardless, so she talks about her dream and stuff like that, and she has another one later on because there's the whole thing of like trying to figure out whether or not there is real demonic possession and stuff like that, because it turns out he had a fall at work and everything, so it's like maybe there was some head trauma. That's her rational explanation of it, like, hey, maybe there was something there that maybe got some brain damage that certain parts of your brain, they do get affected, can lead to you doing violent things. So that's a thought process. And we kind of do learn a little bit more about David along the way too, of like, it turns out that he's in the process of becoming a priest. He's training. This is his second year into a 5-year program. But he does believe. He talked about the fact is that he had walked away, like once he left America and just kind of saw the world, he realized just how small his view was. He's seen so many different miraculous things in the world that he's not willing to just completely just say that there isn't something more in all of this. We have Orson kind of being a dick when they're there, putting the cross in front of him, and he jumps at them just to scare both of them. But at a later point, we have Kristen's having another dream about George, and now it's the whole thing of like, okay, she's like, this isn't real, this can't be real, and he starts cutting off her fingers, which like I said, like I wouldn't expect this for a CBS show, but then a show that their fingers slicing off, him putting on her chest and asking her these questions and stuff, and being like, oh, like the fact of the matter is, have you been thinking about David even though you're married and all this? But then she had put a sign above her head on her ceiling, and she can't read it. And she's like, obviously this is a dream because I can't read it in a dream, which is like a go-to thing. But I like that she does scientifically explain like, oh, that's the reason why you can't read it in a dream. So she's like, this is a dream, you're not real. And she wakes up and says goodbye to George. But the next time they visit Orlin, he switches into Roy mode and he brings up the George thing, and he says something interesting where he's like, there's 60 of us out there. I guess he kind of counts as 61 maybe, and it's like, oh, we're aware of you and you've already met one of us, and talks about everything that went down between her and George. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, what? Because that's the thing, and I think they did a beautiful job of constructing this, or they're being like, is there validity to this? Is there real like demonic supernatural stuff to this? Is it like not? It's kind of like the show. If you've never seen the show Undone, I highly recommend you check it out. It kind of dabbles in that same level of like, is this in someone's head or is this really happening? Not being able to tell, And I thought that was kind of interesting. And then like you kind of feel her panic where it's like, oh, how did he know? He's like, did you tell him? She's like, I didn't tell anyone. But it immediately hit my head. I'm like, you told somebody. And then she realizes it too. And she goes to her therapist like, yo, what's going on? Did you talk? He's like, I never talked to anyone. Go to her files. They're gone. Someone stole it. And then she looks through all the files and stuff, like look through all the names at the prison of like who came to visit him. There's a dude, Leland Townsend. Interestingly enough, played by Michael Emerson, the CBS connection there being, hey, he played Harold in Person of Interest, which is a great show if you've never watched it. But interesting enough, I think the most recent thing, well, obviously you also know him from Lost. It's kind of like being Ben from Lost. It's kind of a big thing. But other than that, the most recent thing I would say was Caden James on, was it season 6 of Arrow? It was like the most recent thing I believe I've seen him in, so there's that. So it turns out that this whole thing was a setup. But it's interesting because it seems like Leland and David have some history, because he brings up the fact that, because basically she's like, Leland tells Kristen, it's like, better stay out of this, leave it to the professionals. And he's like, wait, what do you mean professionals? Who are the professionals? Like, your boy David, Leland, Orland, and the 60. Who are the 60? They're a group, they've become aware of you now because you're on their you're on their radar now because you stepped into this world, which David comes up and he's like, leave her alone. She has nothing to do with this. Because, and the sadistic thing is he uses one of her sessions. He even specifically said, oh, from session 37 of talking to your therapist of like how much you wish that your daughters were gone because then you'd have your freedom. I was like, and that's such, because she was probably in such a, she was stressed out. It was such a vulnerable moment. And because that's supposed to be between you and your doctor. And the sad thing is that's probably going to become public at some point. Like Leland's somehow going to leak that or some shape or form. I just get the feeling, maybe not. We'll kind of see on that. But David's like, you have no power over her because she doesn't believe. But Leland's like, that's actually when I do my best work. Did you forget about Julia? I even love that morbid thing of him being like, oh, like you're a priest. Don't you have, here comes the priest. Don't you have some altar boys or kids that you should be raping? It's like, Jesus. The fact is they would like even going that far to say that line like that. But that's kind of the point of just kind of like the evil that he is. And just the fact is he kind of doesn't care. He'll say whatever the hell he wants to. But he brings up someone named Julia, which must mean, he says later on that it was just a friend. That's what David says, but it's like probably meant more to him. And it's like, oh, she was on her knees crying, like a whiny bitch or something, like a whiny little bitch or something like that. And that pissed David off. So he says, basically he explains that Leland, he's like, I've come across him in many different forms, which my mind immediately, wait, are you saying that he's legitimately the devil just kind of walking around in human form? But he basically refers to him. He probably doesn't want to go too far as to maybe say that, or at the very least, maybe he's like a higher level demon or something like that. You're going by supernatural standards. Like he might be kind of like almost borderline like crossroad demon level or something like that. That's what I'm kind of thinking, kind of like a Crowley type of thing. Maybe not. But basically he says he's a connector. Basically, you don't have to believe in the supernatural to know that evil people push other people to do evil things. And at least he's like, at this point, your world of kind of like the science of everything collides with my world and believing in this heaven and hell thing. And so it turns into a whole thing of like, basically, the fact is he says that makes me think like, okay, so it must mean that he's come across other connectors is what he might have specifically been referencing, which is interesting because I was like, I thought I didn't know Michael Emerson was a part of this until I saw his name. I was like, I thought that maybe he worked for the church. Like, I just thought like show-wise he was going to be part of the group. I thought he was going to be like the one who sent David and stuff like that. That's what I thought it was. But it's like, no, seems like we already introduced ourselves to potentially our main antagonist of the show. And I thought that was kind of neat. I do like that they are making, because he's flipped, because as Harold, he played a good guy. Ben was a bad guy. He had his own reasons. Caden James, kind of a bad guy. He was kind of misled down a certain route. So it's a whole thing in itself. So he plays very complicated characters. We'll leave it at that. I think Harold is the only legitimate good character, 100% good that he's ever played. Every other character leans in certain regards to good, but can be ambiguous at best, like where they morally stand in regards to. But regardless, they look into this whole thing because they end up finding out like, okay, there's something. Wait, let's go back to that recording of like the noises he was making. He was talking about a password, and his wife still believes like, no, Orlin was possessed, but it's like, no, there's something more to this, So they look into it, and it turns out Orlin had basically used his wife's email to basically post on forums. They interestingly enough specifically referenced 4chan. Being a place where just like kind of the very, as if you're familiar with the internet, which I've never been to 4chan, it's kind of labeled as just like this super dark side of the web, just kind of like the Wild West of like kind of anything goes there. But essentially he posted talking about the despicable shit that he's into, and it's like, okay, so basically the murders he committed were kind of like fantasies. So he got in contact with Leland. Leland sent him some pictures and kind of convinced him of like, hey, kind of go out and do this stuff. So basically there was already some darkness in Orlin. It's not like he was a good person, and it's even something that he has said that basically evil, David has said that evil has a way of just pretending like they're normal people. And like I said earlier, to, also spread evil. So that's what this was all about. And it's like you came up with this defense to try and make it so that you could kind of get away with, not necessarily get away, but kind of explain away like why you did what you did, when in actuality it was just your sick, depraved mind that really did all of this. So he's kind of going down and he's like, you're a bitch. And she's like, you have no idea. So she brings this to the DA dude and he's like, see, so this means that I was right and you were wrong. She's like, yay, good for you. You got it. I did like the explanations. I didn't talk about it earlier, but Ben had talked about the fact is that it's like, oh, the sound that Orland's wife had heard, it ended up being like something that could be explained. The same thing for what Kristen had heard, you know, as well. So that was kind of interesting in many different regards. So it's like, hey, job well done. There was no demonic possession to a certain extent, just an evil person trying to find an excuse around this. Doesn't mean there isn't a supernatural element to it. So obviously Ben and David get a new job, and it's like, okay, I don't know, is, you know, Kristen coming along? She's like, I might as well take a look. So she's very interested in this, but I'm very interested to dive into this because we are keep referencing this 60. So I guess it's kind of like there's like 60 demons kind of out there in the world kind of pushing people. So I'm assuming they're going to be kind of like our main attackers. So the question then becomes like, is Leland one of those? Or like I said, is he a higher up, whereas these 60 or maybe lower level demons or something like that? I mean, it seems we're almost kind of getting in that Winona Earp type of level, if you're familiar with Winona Earp, just because of like the whole, you know, wasn't it like, I forget, it's 77 revenants, right? It's been a while, so I actually don't remember what the exact number was. But the whole revenant situation, I think we might kind of be dabbling in that area. So holy crap, I like I said, I am shocked by this show because it seemed very interesting, but now finally seeing it kind of getting like, oh man, like the tone and real feel of the show, I'm really excited because I feel like it's like nothing else on CBS right now. Just because, like I said, in my head, I associate CBS with like maybe some sitcoms, comedies, like dramas and procedurals and stuff like that. So which makes this show kind of stand out. Like it'll probably have a procedural element in certain regards, but still, I'm sure if you went by like some of like the old school programming, you'll probably find something maybe similar to this. I kind of doubt that, but still, I think that's what's going to set this show apart from anything else, not just on TV, but even just in this on this network in general. So I am very, very interested to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I'm really interested into diving into all of this and see where Kristen lands. Like I said, she currently stands in kind of like 50-50 world with all of this, whether she believes or not, but I'm very interested in the cases that might shift that a lot more for her. I'm questioning what she does believe. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.